Welcome, everyone. Salina Public Library is ecstatic to welcome W. Bruce Cameron, author of this year's Salina Reads title, A Dog's Purpose. My name is Stephanie Knopp, and I'm accompanied by Ben Johnson, and will be serving as your hosts this evening. Bruce, we're humbled that you have accepted our invitation. Thank you for joining us. We wanted to take a moment to explain the event that brought us together today. Salina Reads is a community-wide reading event held in the months of September and October, where members across the community read the same title and participate in various activities. During this year's reading of A Dog's Purpose, approximately 50 copies were checked out within 6 weeks. Additional copies of A Dog's Purpose, Ellie's Story for middle readers, and an early reader entitled Stay, a Girl, a Dog, and a Bucket List by Kate Kleiss were donated to local schools and retirement centers, which participated in correlating activities in their buildings. Some of the activities at the library itself included book and movie discussions, story times for children, read to a dog activities for kids, and craft projects for adults and children alike to make dog toys and dog treats. We also partnered with the local animal shelter by collecting donations for animal supplies, as well as displaying photos and bios of adoptable dogs with our Dog's Purpose book display. This was very popular. We had a lot of people paying attention to it and even taking out their phones and snapping pictures with the possibility of adopting one of those dogs. The Dog's Purpose was selected for this annual event based on several factors. The heartwarming nature of the book seemed a good fit for a time with so much chaos. So many people find dogs, and by extension, dog stories, to be uplifting. We also appreciated the diversity of characters and felt that it had a unifying aspect to it. And finally, the topic of dogs, as well as supplemental titles for younger readers, made it appealing to a broad range of ages. So by way of introduction, our guest and author this evening began his writing career with a newspaper humor column, 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, which became a New York Times Bestselling book and a People's Choice Award-winning television series on ABC. And he later followed this first title with 3 other nonfiction titles that you see here. He's perhaps best known, however, as the Benchley Award-winning #1 USA Today and #1 New York Times bestselling author of the 3-book series, A Dog's Purpose. He followed this series with another entitled A Dog's Way Home, the second title of which, A Dog's Courage, released earlier this year. He rounds out his series with the Ruddy McCann series about a repo man / bouncer who steals cars and solves mysteries with his lazy but loyal basset hound, Jake. Bruce's standalone titles are also canine themed, and 2 combine the best of dogs and Christmas. What more could you ask for? His latest, A Dog's Perfect Christmas, released in late 2020. Bruce also writes for younger readers. His children's novels have won awards and are taught in classrooms everywhere. In 2021, he released the 3 newest additions to his Lily to the Rescue series, the last of which is Foxes in a Fix. And in June, he published Cooper's Story, the latest in the Puppy Tale series. By the end of this year, he will have published 30 books, several of which have become international bestsellers and have been translated into over 60 languages. Additionally, Bruce and his wife, Catherine Michon, co-wrote the screenplay for the film adaptation of A Dog's Purpose, which has gone on to become the most successful international live-action dog movie of all time. The motion picture adaptations of his best-selling novels, A Dog's Way Home and A Dog's Journey, were released in 2019, both of which were also co-scripted by Bruce and Catherine. Please welcome Mr. W. Bruce Cameron.
Okay, Bruce, can you hear us?
Okay, yes.
There we go. Awesome. Well, we are so excited to have you here with us today. And we understand that there's actually a Kansas connection for you with us. So can you tell us a little bit about your Kansas connections?
Yeah, I can. I mean, for most of my life, when people said, "Where are you from?" I said Kansas City because my father was a professor of medicine at the University of Kansas Medical Center on on Rainbow, and I grew up in Kansas City. I started off. I bounced around from Roland Park to Prairie Village to Fairway, and then in high school, I lived in Mission Hills. And after I went to college in Missouri, I worked at the fire department that is there on the grounds of Indian Hills Fire Station, Johnson County Fire Station number 2. I was the rescue car driver. So that was my first job. It was really putting my English major to good use there, driving ambulance. So then I lived in Kansas City for a while, and then got a job with a small family-owned company called General Motors, and they are unfortunately located in Michigan. And I guess they decided whether to relocate to Kansas for me or to relocate me to Michigan for them. And they made, I don't know why, the decision that I should be in Michigan. And so then I stayed a long time in Michigan before moving to Colorado. And I was in Colorado for about 15 years, and now I live in Los Angeles because I'm in showbiz.
Yeah, that's the place to be, isn't it? Well, so your experiences in Kansas, did those play into any of your novels, into any of your writing? How did those come together?
Yeah, I have a pretty Midwestern feel of the country. Like I get really comfortable when I'm anywhere in the Midwest. But my next novel, which comes out in January 2023, called Love Clancy, is set entirely in the suburbs of Kansas City. It's a Kansas novel, and then there's a road trip where they drive across Kansas, and so it very much is a character in the book. You might say is the state of Kansas and the city of Kansas City.
Okay. Well, if you need a stopover point, perhaps we consider Salina as one of your stopover points on the, in the novel. Salina.
I'm there. I love it.
Awesome. Well, speaking of your, younger experiences and kind of getting started as a writer, Ben had some questions for you about that.
Yeah. Hi, Bruce. I just wanted to ask you, as you were getting started with your writing career, were there any books or authors that really inspired you and made you want to continue writing?
Well, when you say getting started with my writing career, I think I should be full disclosure. My writing career only recently got started. I spent my whole adult life trying to be a successful novelist, failed miserably. I wrote 9 unpublished and frankly unpublishable novels before I finally sold my first book, which was 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. And that was not that long ago. So I didn't really take inspiration from any particular author. It was the fact of bookstores. It was the fact of being able to walk into a bookstore and see all these books and think to myself, they figured it out. I've got to be able to figure it out. I mean, it looks like almost everybody but my Aunt Lucy has a book for sale in the store. I need to figure out how to get this done.
Well, it looks like you finally cracked the code at least. We're pleased for that. Playing off of that, are there any resources that you have found in your time that you could direct younger readers to help better themselves in their craft?
It's funny, mostly the people that I run into right now are trying to write screenplays, so I have a pretty good go-to for that. But oddly, the book that most inspired me to become a better writer is a book called Screenplay by Sid Field. It's not for kids, but it teaches story structure in such a perfectly scientific way that by the time I was trying to learn how to be a screenwriter, The woman I was seeing at the time, her name is Catherine Michon. She was a screenwriter. She was teaching me to become a screenwriter. I wasn't getting it, so I asked her to marry me so that I would have an in-house tutor. And so, but one of the things she said was, you've got to read this book. It's called Screenplay. And that opened up my eyes to what I've been doing wrong my whole life. There are books like Bird by Bird. That's an amazing book about writing. But for younger people, I almost want to say, as far as your resources, your best resources are from within, because we writers do something to ourselves that I don't think it's fair. We tell ourselves, what I've written is only good if somebody else likes it. But honestly, if you are able to get your voice down on paper and it's good enough for you, then that's your best move there. And don't let other people tell you it's not any good. So I don't know that I would steer a young writer toward any like written resources. I think what I would encourage them to do is spend some time staring at that computer screen or a blank sheet of paper, write the words down. That's how I learned ultimately to get to write, was by doing it and failing at it, but failing at it monetarily. I always liked what I wrote.
That's some very solid advice. I'm gonna have to write down that book title for later. I'm gonna pass it back off to Stephanie for a moment to discuss some of the books you've written.
Well, obviously you got over the hump, and other people do find your books quite enjoyable. So we're here this evening because of A Dog's Purpose, and we're all curious to know where that came from, what inspired the book and the idea. How do we get here?
So I'm gonna reintroduce what we might call a recurring character in my life narrative, which is the same woman, Catherine Michon. So now we didn't get married. We were just dating, and when you're my age and you're dating, it's really hard. I don't recommend it. But I was doing it, and we were driving up the coast of California, and she turns to me out of nowhere and says, you know, my dog just died and I can't go through that again. I will never have another dog. Which to me was like saying, I want to break up, because I am not going to stay in a relationship with somebody who doesn't want to have a dog. So, faced with the idea of either, slowing the car down and shoving her out, or convince her of the error of her ways, I decided to go with plan B. And when I try to make a point, I make up a story, usually. So I made up a story about a dog who reincarnates. So the dog doesn't die. The dog lives forever and remembers each life, and eventually learns lessons that enables him to come back and save his original boy. Because I was trying to tell her, look, that same love you felt with your dog, I get how tragic it is, especially when they die so young, but that same love is available to you if you'll just open your heart to another dog. And if you do, who knows, it could be the same dog soul. So she loved that idea. She loved the story. She told me, that's got to be your next book. So I wrote it. And I called it A Dog's Purpose. And that was the inspiration for how that all came to be.
Okay, wonderful. That's a great story. So aside from trying to catch girls with your dog books, what else do you hope that your readers are going to take away from your titles?
Oh, I love that question, because it really is important to me that people understand that dogs are thinking, spiritual, sentient beings. They are wonderful, loving creatures. They're not just animals. And anybody who mistreats an animal or who dismisses an animal as being not really part of the equation of the human experience, I think is really missing a major point. So what I hope is you go to see A Dog's Purpose, or you read the book, or you see one of my other dog movies, or you do some activity that convinces you that not only are dogs real, dogs have souls, in my opinion, but more important, they depend upon us. We removed the ability of dogs to live in the wild. There are very few successful stories of dogs returning to the wild, or even of packs of dogs that have grown up feral being very successful. You know, you don't see a pack of dachshunds pulling down a wildebeest. You know, it just doesn't happen. So we took responsibility for them. We bred them to our purposes. We bred Labradors. We bred Dobermans. We bred Shih Tzus. We bred the dogs for our use. And so they're like our children now. And we owe it to them to take care of them because they don't have the ability to survive without us. They need us.
And so you obviously have a history of with dogs. You're a dog lover. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the dogs that you've owned, the ones that are special for you?
Yeah, you know, I was very. My parents figured out that they liked dogs better than their children, and they had 3 children, so they got 3 dogs, and that way they had one to replace each one of us. And but for me, it just became they were part of the family. And my dad, who didn't cook, would spend hours in the kitchen preparing homemade dog food, not because we couldn't afford dog food, but because he just loved the experience of serving them this lovingly crafted stew that he had made. So while the kids are having like pancakes for dinner, the dogs are having gourmet chicken for dinner, you know. And so I grew up in a family where the lives of dogs were as honored as the lives of people, and just sort of took that to heart. I really have always had dogs, and it was only a brief period of time. When I first moved to LA, we lived in a high rise and we couldn't see how we could possibly have a dog in a high rise. And then my daughter, who rescues dogs, brought us a little puppy. And let me tell you, housebreaking a dog in a high rise is a real challenge. You have to really be good at anticipating when the dog is going to need to squat, so you can scoop the dog up, run to the elevator, wait for the elevator, get in the elevator, and a lot of times you wind up with a wet t-shirt, and that's just, that's the experience.
Well, obviously these dogs have come to life through your stories, and so Ben has some questions about your writing process and how that all, how the magic is on the page. Oh, actually, he's going to talk to you about the movies.
Okay.
As we sort of covered in the introduction, you and your wife both helped to co-write the script for A Dog's Purpose. What other aspects of the movie were you involved with? Were you involved with casting or any of the design processes?
Well, so my wife is a movie director, and a movie director is sort of the captain of the ship. And so even though she's a guest on somebody else's ship, she's still very involved in all those decisions. For me, I mean, we were on set and I was playing with the dogs. So they would be like, "Where's Bruce?" And they'd be like, "He's over there playing with the corgi." I tried to adopt that corgi, but I couldn't sell that. But we were, yeah, so there is a role for a screenwriter on set. It is to be there in case there's a hole in the script. For example, on A Dog's Way Home, where Catherine and I are the only screenwriters, there was a part that we had written for a character that was supposed to be a veteran of Afghanistan. And he was homeless and he was living on the streets in Gunnison, Colorado. Well, when the actor shows up, it was James Edward Olmos, and he's a great actor, but he doesn't look like he's from the war in Afghanistan. He looks like he's from, you know, the First World War. He looks really old. And so we had to rewrite the part immediately and make it all about Vietnam instead of Afghanistan. And then the really weird thing is, after all that work, they pretty much cut the whole scene. I mean, they really pared down his presence in the movie, which is part of the process. You wind up with all this beautiful stuff that you can't use because you don't have enough time.
So speaking about one of the actors in the movie, as far as the casting process went, have you been pleased with how your characters have been portrayed and the people who have brought their stories to life?
Oh yeah, I mean, Dennis Quaid is, he's just an actor's actor. He is so good. And he brings so much charisma to the role of what we call old Ethan. And for both A Dog's Way Home and A Dog's A Dog's Journey. Dennis was amazing. I pretty much got to know most of the actors. I didn't have any opportunity to talk to Ashley Judd. That's about the only major actor on the movies that I didn't get to talk to. By and large, actors are gregarious, fun, outgoing, interesting people, and so it's fun to hang out with them, although I'd still rather hang out with the dogs.
All right, I'm gonna pass it back off to Stephanie and to talk a little bit about the writing process.
Okay, there's the key.
And we'll talk about how the magic gets to the paper. So, do you have any habits or rituals when you're writing that helps you get things down?
Yeah, I go to the Church of Procrastination, and I study there. I sing all the songs. I do a lot of snacking. Sometimes I will find that I spent the whole day planning my snack regimen, and now I don't have time to write but the planning was exhausting. But in seriousness, I for the most part, am very diligent about outlining. I'm very much about putting the outline through at least 3 drafts to get it to the point where I can sit down and start writing. And when I don't do that, I find I get lost pretty quickly. I really need that blueprint. I really need every scene outlined. But then when I have that, it just is such an easy flow process. But it's mostly rewriting. I will dictate my first draft, and then I will rewrite that draft, and then I will take a pencil to it. I actually have what I call the green ink or the grink draft, and then the blue ink or the blink draft. And I go over each draft twice with 2 different colors of ink. We can kind of guess which colors they are. And then I do another draft, and then one more draft, and then I send it to the publisher, who gives me notes, and then I do another draft. So when people say writing is rewriting, they're not kidding. Writing is all about rewriting, especially when you're doing it for a living. That's what it's all about.
So did I catch it right? You actually dictate the first draft. Don't write it, you speak it?
Yeah. I speak it, yes, and it's mainly because I started to write right around the time that James Edward Olmos was born, and so I have been typing on a variety of devices. And my first novel I wrote on a manual typewriter, and so my fingers are kind of tired, and so anything I could do to take the pressure off these decrepit devices that I call my finger digits, so I'm going to do that. And I can write. I have more trouble dictating to Microsoft, so I actually speak a transcript and send it off to a transcription service. It works really well for me, and I can sit on the recumbent bike and do it at the same time, which gives me, that means I can have more cookies. That's how I look at it.
What kind of cookies are we talking about?
We're talking chocolate chip. Oh my gosh, I've gotten so obsessed. We can't talk about this, okay? And not unless we can turn this into an adult step meeting, and I can start talking about these chocolate chip cookies. But other than that, we shouldn't go down there.
Okay, well, we might need to get your recipe later on. So do you find it more challenging to write the first book in a series or to write the subsequent novels?
That's a great question. Challenging. So the challenge in the first book is just getting the voices right, getting the story. The challenge in subsequent books in a series isn't so much related to that. It's how do I keep this fresh? How do I not just write the same novel again? How do I make it here's a great example, because I think that A Dog's Purpose trilogy, each book is pretty different than the one before. They definitely, I set out to make a mold, and then I promptly broke it for A Dog's Journey, and then I broke it again for A Dog's Promise. In A Dog's Way Home, I wrote a sequel called A Dog's Courage, which is just out. And A Dog's Courage is the story of the same dog, and you're like, well, so wait a minute. The dog is going in A Dog's Way Home. The dog gets lost because it's banned from Denver. It's forced to go live in Farmington, New Mexico. Doesn't understand what the heck is going on. Jumps the fence and makes its way Bella makes her way back across the Rocky Mountains, a 200-mile journey that takes her a couple of years. So was I going to write the same story again? No. In A Dog's Courage, you'll find the tone is completely different than any of my other dog books. In A Dog's Courage, there's danger and adventure. It's kind of relentless. I mean, the book just takes off within a few chapters. You're in the middle of a huge fire that burns throughout the book, and it separates Bella from her people, and she's just trying to get back to her people who are just on the other side of the fire, but she can't get there. And then there's all these dislocated animals because of the fire. It's a completely different book, but it's the same characters, and it's kind of the same setup. Dog lost in the Rocky Mountains. So it makes sense that it's a sequel, but I had, once again, the challenge was make it fresh, make it new, make it interesting, even with the same characters.
And speaking of your characters, you have a lot of dog characters. Are the character names and sort of the personalities of the characters, I mean, where do those come from? Are they from your real life dogs you know, or dogs you've owned, or where does that come from? Because there's a lot of dogs.
It's funny because we're all aware of the huge differences in dogs, but the difference between a beagle and a terrier and a Labrador, they're all different, right? But fundamentally, deep down, dogs are kind of the same. They're optimistic, they're joyous, they're happy, they're loving, they want to be with us. I start with those core attributes, and then I try to massage it in the direction of the individual characters. It is a little difficult to keep them different, because if you had a gathering of people sitting at the table and they were all optimistic and all joyous and all happy, it'd be a really boring dinner conversation. I'm sure that they would love each other, but it would just be like, oh my gosh, Uncle Fred, he's so happy all the time, which was not my Uncle Fred, by the way. So what I would say is that I do my best, but you will notice if you read all of my dog books, there's some commonality because dogs have a lot.
All right, well, I don't know if you're aware or not, but there are a good number of librarians who are cat people.
I heard that.
Some of them are curious about why you never chose to have the dog characters become friends with cats.
Oh, that is such a misguided question, because in A Dog's Way Home, Bella is raised by cats. She's a dog who loves cats, and she winds up. I mean, if you've seen the movie, you know this. A little bit of a plot spoiler. Thank you. A bit of a plot spoiler is that she winds up taking care of a baby cougar in the wild. That's A Dog's Way Home. So I don't remain hostile to cats, but I've got a dog right now who thinks the purpose of cats is to run from him. And if they don't play that game, he is really angry. And he will refuse to acknowledge that they exist. And so that serves them right? Anyway, yes, I'm aware that lots of librarians are cat people, and I'm not. I want librarians to be my friends. I love librarians, and I'm sure I'd love their cats. The cats wouldn't love me. I had a cat. The cat didn't love me, but I loved it. I thought it was a great cat. That's just cat.
So would you ever consider writing a book or a series that focused on cat with the main character?
I actually am working on a book where the cat is the main character. It's really difficult because they don't start out like dogs, happy and joyous and celebrating and just wanting to love people. Some of them come out and they want to kill people, I'm pretty convinced. And there's a great cat. There are two great cats in my new book, Love Clancy, that'll be out in the fall. And as I said, A Dog's Way Home, that's a dog who is raised by cats. So I'm not running from it. There are cats. I get it. My dog gets it. We're just trying to get along.
All right. Well, I think that that this effort will make you some more librarian friends, I'm sure of it. All right, well, we're going to switch over now, and we just have a few questions from our participants here in person and also via Zoom. So that's going to ask away.
All right, go Ben.
All right, I have a first question here that is, do you have a favorite novel out of the ones that you've written?
Oh, I love that question, but there's a little bit like asking a father which one of his kids are his favorite. There's no question that I'm best well known for A Dog's Purpose. But for me, the most fun read I've written as an adult book, as a grown-up book, is A Dog's Courage. It just has so much stuff going on. There's so much danger and there's so many thrills. And that doesn't really characterize my other dog books so much. So I would have to say that is my current favorite, A Dog's Courage.
All right. We have another question drawing back to your corgi friend from the set. Are corgis your favorite dog? Do you have a favorite type of dog?
My favorite dog is rescue, because I believe you can get the best dog in the world just by rescuing one. And I'm not anti AKC registered breeders, because that's how you keep the breeds alive. And I think it is a wonderful thing that you could buy pure blood Labradors with long pedigrees and X-rayed hips and all that stuff that people do. I got my dog, cost me $0 for Tucker. And subsequent to that, he's become more expensive than any car I've ever owned, because we just go to the vet now. We go to the vet so often, I've got my own parking spot there. It's got my name on it because we're just at the vet. He's a high maintenance dog. But that's, to me, still, you could get the most wonderful dog just by rescuing one. And, they all need a home.
So speaking of your dog, have pets ever gotten in the way of your writing, or do they just sort of continue to fuel you with that love that they have?
Well, I mean, my dog Tucker, he doesn't get in my way. He won't even answer his email. He's really lazy. But nonetheless, he seems to believe that he is solely responsible for any dog book I've ever written. And I'm a little sick of that attitude, because he doesn't do much of anything. But nonetheless, he gives himself credit, and hey, fake it till you make it, right, Tucker? So no dog has ever gotten in my way, other than I have to drop everything and take him to the vet because he broke a tooth or whatever is the deal that happens today.
So no chewed up manuscripts or anything like that.
No, I can't. I've never called a publisher and said, "Hey, my dog ate my manuscript from me." For one thing, they're all electronic, so it would have to be like an electronic dog. It gets too complicated.
So I have here, was there a certain part of A Dog's Purpose, or I think we could even extend it to your other novels? Are there parts of books that are more particularly difficult to write?
Oh yeah, I mean, I cry when I'm writing my books, because it can be so emotional for me. It's so hard for me when we have to say goodbye to a dog in a book, or when relationships don't work out among people we really care about. I get very upset. I've got a pretty vivid imagination. I can cause myself to go paranoid just by imagining someone's outside my door, even though I was just thinking about it for a scene, and all of a sudden now I believe there is somebody outside the door. But that's probably just something wrong with me. But what I'm more focused on is that when I'm crafting a book, when I'm writing a book, I'm so pulled into it that I'm there. I am experiencing it as I'm writing it. That's the only way I know how to write.
All right. So this month is actually National Novel Writing Month. Have you ever participated in National Novel Writing Month, or have you even, which is where people try to write a novel in a month? Have you ever done anything like that?
For me, every month is National Novel. I'm writing, and I was, 5 minutes before this conversation, I was working on my novel. I think that I would question whether I could write a novel in 30 days. I could write the first draft in 30 days. What an odd thing. you know, hey, if you're someone who can write a novel, but see, like I can't write something first draft and say it's done. I have to rewrite it 6-7 times, and you just can't do that in 30 days.
And so how long on average would you say it takes for you to go from start to finish?
Yeah, that's great, because it used to take me 18 months, and now I've got it down to 6 months because I have a rhythm. I mean, when I was talking about the grink draft and the blink draft, I probably sounded like I had lost my marbles, but because I've done that so many times, I know exactly where I am and what I need to get done when I'm doing that grink draft. And the blink draft is faster, and I know why and what I'm doing there. So every stage now I've been through enough that I don't have to sit down and relearn anything. I don't have to like try to figure out what I'm doing. This is routine. This is just about getting the story down the path far enough to make sure I can turn it in on time.
We're still getting a few questions in as we're talking here.
Okay, so we have a little bit of show and tell here, Bruce. So for our event this evening, we really have drawn in our community members to participate in this, and we have a wonderful friend of one of our librarians who was able to make us some doggy treats for people. So so this evening, when everyone got here, they had their doggy treat bag, and I'm going to open this so you can get a different one. We have the highlight is that we were able to get cookies with the different names of the characters on them. And does anybody have a popcorn cookie? Oh, yeah. And there are some that are pop prints, and so we wanted to let you know that we have been enjoying.
Fantastic.
Okay. All right. That was a request. The request came that we show those to you. We have one of the events this for Salina Reads was that at one of our local retirement facilities, they were they did a group read and some writing activities around the dog's purpose. And this evening we're having an offsite showing of this there. So shout out to Presbyterian Manor. Hey there, Presbyterian Manor. And they wanted you to see the truth. Okay. And so what was your favorite part about writing a dog's purpose? That's another question.
It was the way it came to me, because I liken my first outline creative process as being like a mouse running a maze, where I will go in one direction until I hit a block, and then I'll turn around and I'll go in another direction until I get blocked. And that's how I make my way through the story. A Dog's Purpose was the only book that I've ever had that came to me as if it were streaming from a service. I was driving, I was trying to convince this woman that we should get a dog, and I started telling this story, and it all flowed through me and out of my mouth as if I were like reading it. And I did characters, I did descriptions. I talked for more than an hour and a half, straight through telling the story. And I'm here to tell you that the final draft varied very little from that telling in that car. And I know that to be true because she made me record it. She says, "You're going to forget that." So she had to listen to me tell the story again. And I did the same thing, acted the parts and told the story, set the scene. Took me another hour and a half. So we practically ran out of the state of California before I got the thing done. And then when I wrote it, it was just like what I had dictated.
All right, and then we have this, we also had a couple of our high schools. They also held book discussion groups related to this at the schools. And so one of the librarians from the school is asking, you know, graphic novels are so popular with the younger crowd these days. Have you ever thought about making one of the books into a graphic novel?
I haven't, because I don't understand anything about it. And it's just my ignorance. I mean, I have seen a few graphic novels, read a couple. I thought that were pretty funny, but ultimately I just don't understand what I'm doing. And I'm old enough. I'm still learning my craft. I really don't feel like I've got the bandwidth to be able to go in and try something that new and unusual for me. But it's a great. I mean, I love the implied compliment is that I would be able to pull something like that off. I'm not sure that I could.
All right. And I know a lot of people are really interested in Tucker. One of the questions is, what is his favorite tool?
You know, Tucker's the oddest dog. He doesn't like to go for walks. He doesn't really like to play with toys. He certainly he's big into the treat thing. He'll definitely go for treats. And he doesn't really do many tricks, except for he's the only dog I've ever had that will do stay. I mean, I will tell Tucker to stay, leave the room, forget what I'm doing, come back, and then 10 minutes later, he's still sitting where I told him to stay. I've never had a dog willing to do that at all. In fact, you know, when I grew up with mostly Labradors, you tell a Labrador to stay, and they're like, but you've got the treats and you're leaving. I'm no fool. I'm going to follow.
All right. That's it.
So we have a question here that's asking, what do you do when you're not writing? Do you have any hobbies?
Yeah, I'm so boring. You know, I do eat a lot. We could go back to the cookie thing, but I'm trying to avoid thinking about those. I like to ride my bicycle. I live in Southern California, so I've got access to the ride along the beach. I like to go mountain biking in the mountains, both here and in Colorado. That's my hobby. That's what I do in my downtime.
We have a question here back to you being on set and being able to talk to some of the actors. They're wondering if you ever had the chance to converse with Noah Jupe.
Noah. What? You know, I'm drawing a blank on who Noah is. Is that just?
All right. Well, if we get further information from the person who asked it, we'll come back to it.
All right, we have a question here about your book, A Dog's Perfect Christmas. Someone said that it is one of their favorite stories and was wondering if you could share a little bit about the inspiration behind the mother's sickness and the family having to relearn someone how to live.
Yeah, thank you. A Dog's Perfect Christmas. What a strange history this book has. You know, it was conceived before COVID. We weren't calling it A Dog's Perfect Christmas. We had like 19 names. We just couldn't settle on a name. And we finally decided, you know, at the end of the book, it does talk about how to a puppy, every Christmas is perfect. People have expectations. And the theme of the book is everybody has these expectations around what Christmas is going to be. And there's a fairly dysfunctional family trying to pull it all off. And when the mother gets sick and has to go into the hospital, it changes the formula. Now everybody else has to step up, and they're not used to doing that. So it's bedlam. And I had in mind that the mother would go into the hospital, but I didn't plan this around COVID. COVID hit subsequently to the book being turned in. And COVID like affected everything, including this book. This book came out, the bookstores were closed, nobody heard of it. I am shocked that someone has read it. That's amazing. We're actually leaving it in hardback and trying it again this year because, you know, nobody even heard of it. I so adore this book. I was so happy with how it turned out. I love the characters. I love the story. it's a dysfunctional family trying to get their act together in time for Christmas, and then into it bounds a young puppy who is either going to destroy the whole thing or be the glue that brings the family back together. And that's I mean, it's a feel-good book. It's a Christmas book, but that's the inspiration for the whole thing just came from this sense that I remember growing up, how my dad was a professor of medicine, so he was always at the hospital. He was delivering babies, so it was really up to my mom to run the show, and I remember thinking, if anything happens to mom, there goes Christmas. We can't possibly have Christmas without mom. So, and that was pretty important to me as a boy. So I think that was the germ of the idea, is what would happen to a family that absolutely depends on mom for Christmas if mom is too sick to be there.
So sort of looking at, I know everyone's a little sick of COVID-19, but what do you think the role of literature is, sort of unprecedented time where it's
I love that question. It kind of goes to why I write. I write stories that I want to bring people hope and make them feel good and divert their attention from some of the world's events. I don't feel that it's my obligation or within my capabilities to change the world so much as to just be a little part of it. My hopes for anybody reading my books is that they walk away feeling an uplifting story has really resonated with them. My books generally end on a happy note. I can't think of any where they didn't ultimately. The most grim book I ever wrote was one called The Dog Master, which concerns the Paleolithic. But the good news is we humans survived the Paleolithic because we're here to read a book about it. So even then, it's an uplifting story, even though it was about a very brutal time.
That's amazing to hear. We have a question. Are you active or working or participated with any sort of animal events or animal organizations?
Yeah, thanks. I'm on the board of an animal rescue in Denver called Life is Better. I work closely with Best Friends, which is an umbrella animal organization that supports animal rescues all over the country. I regularly appear at events for animal shelters and benefits, and we contribute books for silent auctions to 501c3 animal shelters. I really believe that this is so important, and it manifests itself so many different ways. In some places, the city council has elected to spend city funds on top state-of-the-art municipal shelters, and that's great. Other places, it's up to private charities to pick up the slack, and that's where I like to focus my attentions.
We have a question here. What was your initial reaction to finding out that the book was a #1 York Times bestseller?
My initial reaction. So it was interesting. My stated ambition in life since I was in junior high was to be a #1 New York Times bestselling author. So I had labored my whole adult life, and then I had arrived. And part of me was like, okay, but where am I going to be next week? Because that's the kind of competitor I am. But no, Catherine and I made sure we really celebrated that day. We made sure we popped the cork on some champagne, and that we just inhaled the moment, because it was so fulfilling in so many ways. And then, I mean, it's a tough business, so I won't pretend like it's been anything but a roller coaster ride ever since. But they can't take that away from me. And it was the great achievement of my life. I really feel that way.
We have another question here about one of your books. Someone from our chat says that they love Max's story and would like to hear a little bit about the inspiration behind that one.
Max. Max is a little dog in a big city, and Max is a toy terrier mix who concludes as he finds himself living in New York that the only way he's going to survive is if he adopts a big dog attitude. And so, though Max weighs just a couple of pounds, he comports himself like he's a bull mastiff. He goes through life assuming that he's the boss dog and he's not going to take any lip from anybody. And he really is convinced that the only way to find a person is wait for the exact right person to come along. So when people are at an adoption fair and they're like, "Oh, what a sweet dog," he tries to nip their fingers. They don't want to go with him. He has a very, very clear image in his mind who he wants to be with. He's very much like the women in New York City, in my experience. They all know exactly the kind of man that they want to date. He doesn't exist, but they talk about it constantly. Okay, that was a joke. But anyway, so my whole thing about Max is that he's kind of unique to any dog I've ever written. Now, most of my dogs are fairly large size, and it's usually because they need to move across vast swaths of country, or they need, but Max doesn't. He lives in New York. He can go by cab. So he doesn't really need to be a big dog. And then the way he folds into his girl's life and helps make connections for her, I'm so happy with how Max's story turned out. And that's a book for middle readers, for like 3rd grade to 6th grade. It's part of my Puppy Tales series. I think I've got 7 or 8 books in that series now, and I love all of them. There was so much fun to write, and there's so much fun to see kids' reactions when they read them.
We touched a little bit earlier when we discussed your writing as it concerns cats. Someone wants to know, do you have any other animals that you love or would be thinking about including in the stories?
Like maybe unicorns. I think that I'm probably good with domestic pets. I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in the suburbs of Kansas City, and my daughter has chickens. So the book I'm writing now has a little bit about chickens in it, but for the most part, I don't really know much about other animals other than I like them. I would adopt a panda if we were allowed, but so anyway, no, I haven't really thought about that. I had an idea for a dolphin book one time, and then a movie came out that was similar, and I thought, what am I? Stick to dogs and cats. People know you as the dog and cat
king. As far as other writers go, do you have a book or series that you just absolutely love?
Well, I don't really read the kind of books that I write. I mean, I'm in family fiction is my category, but I would tell you that I read mystery thrillers. That's really where I am. I occasionally stray outside of that. I don't read memoir. I don't really read humor. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've written that I wouldn't read, honestly. That's just who I am. But part of that is deliberate. People are always sending me dog books. And as much as I appreciate a free book, I have to say, I can't read. If I sit down and read a dog book, what if I come across something that's very similar to what I've already got in my outline? What do I do then? Do I change my outline? Because I don't want people to think I stole the idea from this book. And yet, how many things can happen to a dog? There's only so many adventures, and then pretty much you're done, And so then I'm like, well, I would just as soon not read other people's dog books. I'm sorry.
Any more questions from the public? Okay, wonderful. So what's next, Bruce, for you? You mentioned a title you have coming out in 2023. What's on the horizon? What are we going to see coming down the pipe?
Yeah, in March I've got the 8th book in my Lily to the Rescue series books. That's for even younger readers than 3rd grade, and it's a chapter book. It's about this wonderful dog named Lily who lives at an animal rescue and helps save baby animals. And I just love Lily, and I love the way children react to Lily. I love going to speak at an elementary school, and they're all holding their copy of one of the Lily books. And, you know, there's some fantastic elements. The most recent one is called Lily Foxes in a Fix, and it's about some Arctic foxes that the zoo decides to rehome in the wild. It turns out that Arctic foxes are really good at being released to the wild and doing just fine. So Lily gets involved in that, and it's fun. It's a little fanciful, but it's a good read. And so I've got one coming out in March of next year, 2022. It's called The Three Bears, Lily and the Three Bears. Lily, in this case, there's a mother bear brought in that a poacher has shot but not killed, and they managed to save the mother bear. But during the process, they discovered that she's nursing, so she must have cubs up there in the mountains somewhere, and they've got to go find the bear cubs. And Lily goes, of course, with her third grade person, Maggie Rose, and her two brothers, and they decide they don't like the instructions they've been given, which basically say stay on the path. They wander off the path, they get lost in the woods. Lily saves the day because it's Lily to the rescue, but it's a real adventure. I really like it, and it breaks the pattern. It's not like the other Lily books. So that's coming in March. April sees the trade paperback of A Dog's Courage, and in the fall I've got a book called Lacey's Story coming out. I think that's what's coming.
And I haven't had the pleasure of reading them yet, but I'm very intrigued by Ruddy McCann, the Repo Man. And I noticed there are only 3 titles. Will we ever see an addition to Ruddy McCann?
Oh, so I love that. I love that question. I pronounce his name Ruddy. I love that question because every time I go and do a book signing or speak at an event and I'm taking questions, someone invariably holds up their hand and says, when are we going to get another book in your repo series? And I'm like, I know what the book is. I can see it. I could write it tomorrow. What people want from me right now are dog books. So I really just haven't found the market for that series yet. So I hope soon to be able to announce that I've got a deal for another Ruddy book or two, because I really love the characters. I love it. I think you need to read it because it is something. You've never read a book like this before, I promise you, because there's just too many quirky elements all come together at once. It really gave me an opportunity to sort of flex my writing muscles in a way that writing from a dog's perspective doesn't, because a dog can't say something like, I decided to wait for 5 minutes, because a dog doesn't know what a minute is. So a dog would never think that. But Ruddy is a person, so he can say, I decided to wait for 5 minutes, and he can make metaphors that relate to things that aren't dog-like, whereas a dog has to have every metaphor has to come from being a dog. It's harder to do than you would think. And so it was a real respite and a welcome one and a fun one to write about this Repo Man.
We look forward to editions and for all the new stuff that's coming out. It just seems like there's always another good story behind the one with you out. So, well, we're looking at the clock, Bruce, and we want to respect your time. We appreciate you spending your evening with us and your willingness to share your stories and your talents, and with not only us, but with the wider community, readers everywhere. So thank you. I wanted to end with one of your quotes from A Dog's Purpose. It's easier to be a dog if one accepts that there are many things that are incomprehensible and just concentrate on being happy. I think it's good advice for all of us. So, it's just been delightful to have you here, and we look forward to all the great things we'll see coming from you. So thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. This has been a real delight, and it's so fun to talk to people from the state of Kansas.
Yeah.